All right. Well, would like to welcome everyone to the Property Tax Workshop, looking at a number of things this evening. My history with these, just so you know, is that I have been leading these workshops since 2010, focused on just really teaching people how they can protest their own property tax appraisal. And last couple of years, with the market doing what it's done, we've kind of changed the content, and we're doing that again tonight. My name is Craig Smyser. I am the broker owner at 1835 Realty. I've been in real estate since 1999. I have, no special certification, training, designation, anything related to property tax appraisals. I simply am someone who protests my own appraisals a lot. And because I deal with real estate, it's just something that I, know a fair amount about, and am happy to share with people what I have learned and, answer questions that people have. I am not someone who can protest on your behalf. There are companies that do that. That does require a particular license from the state. So I don't do protests for you. But I can assist you if you're going to do your own with providing you some basic data on comparable sales. But we'll get all into that in a little bit. First, really what I want to do is just kind of give an overview of the market and how we've got to where we're at now and set the stage for this evening. I think, as you all know, the Austin area real estate market in 2022 was a roller coaster, right? We went up for the first 5 months, and then we went downhill from there. From a tax appraisal standpoint, we're in really much the same boat as last year. If you have owned a home for a few years and have a homestead exemption, the vast majority of those folks have no reason to protest at all, because you still haven't caught up to the market value. But for those who purchased a home in the last couple of years, or if you own a property that doesn't have a homestead exemption, well, then there very well might be a good reason for you to protest this year. So we're definitely going to talk about the actual protest process. But because I think a lot of people aren't going to be protesting, there are other things that we're going to cover first, and then we'll go into the nuts and bolts of doing the actual protest. So when the things that I think we're going to cover tonight, we're going to look at just what overall did we see from the 23 tax appraisals, both in Travis, and we'll mention a little bit about Williamson. Definitely going to talk about the homestead exemption. We're going to talk about the current property tax reform going on in the current legislative session. Then we'll get more into the protests about, who should be protesting, some of the easier ways to protest. Maybe you bought a house last year, and again, through the nuts and bolts of the actual process. I will most likely not answer questions until the end. It's just me. I don't have someone monitoring this sort of thing as well with me, so I'm just going to kind of roll through. So if you have a question, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to go ahead and put it there. Don't use the chat feature, use the Q&A feature, and I will get to it, obviously, before we're all done. So just, when you think of it, go ahead and put it in there. This is being recorded, and we'll either take this session or next week's session, which is going to be pretty much the same thing, and those will be available on YouTube if you know someone who misses this and would like to look at it later. All right, so let's start with the overall trends in the market and the property tax appraisals. We began 2022 with scorching hot market, right? The inventory was low. We had multiple offers, sales prices over list price. I mean, y'all remember what it was. And then the prices peaked in May. After that, they began to come down. And that coincided with the Fed raising the federal funds rate, which in turn impacts mortgage rates. I mean, it's not a one-to-one ratio, but they do, and especially this time around, have followed each other. So the rates on the 30-year mortgage more than doubled last year. We were in the threes. And then, in fact, at one point during the fall, we were over 7%, right? So that was definitely something that stalled the market, and prices began to fall quickly after the May peak. In fact, in the first few months, the pace of the drops was very rapid. And then the rate of decline eased up. And I talk about how we just kind of were slowly drifting downward after that. If you're looking at October, November, December, we were down, maybe a point and a half each month, whereas earlier on we were down, 4 or 5%. It was pretty rapid. But by the end of 22, we were down about 22% off the peak of prices from May. And that's all across the Austin metro area. Generally, when I run my numbers, I am looking at Travis and Williamson, and I'm looking at resale homes only, because the data from the builders is incomplete when we look at the MLS. They don't all put their homes in there, and not all of their homes are put in there. If someone's building from scratch, it'll never hit the MLS. So generally, I'm just looking at resale homes, Travis and Williamson, residential only categories. I'm not looking at rentals or things like that. And then I'm always looking at the median price. When you hear prices quoted in the real estate world, we're talking about the median price. That's just the general measure we use for pricing. So when the appraisal districts determine value, they're theoretically trying to peg the value to January 1 of each year. So we just got our 23 appraisals, and that's what they think it was worth on January 1, right? So when I look at some numbers, I'm going to give you some stats here in a minute. What I was doing is I'm looking at the prices from January of 22, and I'm comparing them to January of 23. These are contracts that were predominantly written in December. So these are the prices that are absolutely the closest to January 1. Someone else may choose to use a different method. They might choose the numbers from December to December. But in reality, these numbers aren't going to be very far off. But I just want you to know the numbers I was using. So when I look at the MLS data for resale homes, the median value dropped during that time frame 6.7% in Travis County. But when we look at the Travis Central Appraisal District's reports on their assembly of data for appraisals this year, they report that the average residential appraisal increased by 0.1% for this tax year. So we've got the appraisal district saying it was up slightly. We can even say it was flat. I'm fine to say it was, they're calling it flat. And yet MLS data says that the median value dropped 6.7% during that time frame. Now let's look at Williamson County. The median price drop for resale homes in the MLS was 7.6%. But according to the Williamson Central Appraisal District, their average appraisal of home values for 2023 for this tax year was down 12%. So you've got TCAT at a 0.1 increase and WCAT dropping them by 12%. That's a huge difference between two adjacent counties whose real estate values are generally in sync, right? We usually don't have, Williamson County going up and Travis going down or vice versa. They're generally pretty much in lockstep with each other, maybe off just a little bit. So that's a big difference. And I have been reviewing hundreds of properties that belong to my clients. I mean, every year while I do these workshops, for all my clients, we go through everything. I mean, I've got a wonderful assistant. She assembles all the data. And then I look at the spreadsheets and I look and see who of my clients, what their numbers are. And I call them and we talk about, hey, you're good this year. You don't have to worry about anything. So I've gone through a lot of these. And what I can tell you is that what I'm seeing is that a lot of the homes in Travis County, in my opinion, are overappraised. And conversely, Williamson County, they seem to be overall underappraised, which makes sense, right? Because we were talking about somewhere around 7% seemed to be the average median decline between the two counties. And one of them stayed flat or a slight increase, and the other came down 12%. So they kind of reacted very differently to very similar data, okay? Let's see. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk a bit about some of the the terminology to make sure that we're all on the same page regarding these, property tax appraisals. So let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'll pull up mine so we can just see something on the screen. I know it's a little tough talking and seeing me the entire time that we're here, but I don't have a big, slideshow presentation. I don't think this really lends itself well to one of these things. But anyway, I want to talk real quick before I bring it up. I will interchange all night long the words appraisal and assessment. When you hear me say those, they're the same thing. It's the appraisal. It is the value that the county has assigned. So let me go ahead and share a screen real quick so you can see. Now, this may look a little different than what you've got on any paper. If you've looked at the paper one, I have not received my paper protest notice. What happens is the vast majority of properties are sent out on the same day, whether they're posted online or emailed or mailed out. Mine was not in the first batch this year. And so my value just posted a couple of days ago. I think it was on Tuesday that my valuation finally posted. So I have not received my paper copy yet. Now I know I can link to it on here, but I only want to have one open at a time. So I just want to run through some of these numbers with you so that we're all on the same page with it. So what you see on here, this is my property that I live in, and it's got the last few years. So let's just go ahead and look at this first line, and obviously the year. And then I'm going to jump over here to appraised value. What we're talking about in this sense is this is what Travis Central Appraisal District, in my case, or any other county across Texas, this is what they think the market value of the house was on January 1. Okay. Now they're going to break that up between land value and the improvement value. So the land itself and the house that's on it. I'm not going to get into whether these two numbers are correct. I guarantee you they are not correct. I have battled with TCAT over the years simply because my own personal house in my little sub neighborhood, I have one of the least desirable lots. And I'm in a neighborhood where some lots overlook Lake Austin, some lots look over a nice canyon, many of the other homes back to a green belt. And so I've got an inferior lot. And they'll compare, I'll look in past years, and you can see often where mine was 85,000, a lot backing up to Lake Austin might be at 120, 125. And I'll go to them and I'll say, look, that lot is worth far more. They'll never adjust the land value. They'll just adjust the total value. So I don't try to pretend that. Last year, we saw massive changes in land market value for some homes, and in others, it was a massive change in the improvement value. It was no rhyme or reason. I'm telling you, don't worry a whole lot about it unless you can prove that your land is really off compared to some others, like in my situation. Really just focused on the appraised value. And then we're going to skip over the last column, net appraisal or net appraised. This is what you're being taxed upon. This is the number that matters the most, okay? And then this value limitation adjustment. For most people, this is going to be where that 10% homestead cap comes in. So we'll talk about the homestead in depth here shortly, but you can see they've appraised my house. They think the market value is $963,000 and some change. However, I'm being taxed essentially on $678,000. So in my opinion, I'm not going to protest this year because my house on January 1 was definitely worth more than $678,000. Now, I don't think my house was worth $963,000, but that doesn't matter. I'm only going to protest if I can save some money. So I want to understand these values. The appraised, that's the market value, but the net appraised is what you're being taxed at. If you've lived in your home for a few years, these numbers are going to be different. If you bought your house recently, they very well are probably the same number. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop sharing the screen, and let's get back to it here. So anyway, there are some people who do think you should protest to get that appraised value down, even if it doesn't save you money. I completely disagree with that. because it doesn't do you any good. You're not going to save any money. Why are you going to take the time and effort to do it? Now, the argument I hear that people say you should do that is because it would help you the next year. It doesn't. Every year when the appraisal district looks at valuing your property, they don't look at what they valued it at last year. They're looking at what is the value in the market this year. The only thing that comes into play on last year is if you have a homestead exemption, and that's based on the taxable value, not the market appraisal. Okay, so that's my thought on why you shouldn't shouldn't protest if your net appraisal there is the key figure. All right, so as you look at your tax appraisal, one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that you have all the exemptions to which you're entitled. I will go ahead and share the screen once more. And actually, I guess I should have done this while I had it up before. You scroll up a little bit more from here, you'll see it'll list out your exemptions. Homestead is the most popular one. Over 65 exemption if you're 65 years or older. I said over 65. It's 65 and over. So if you're 65 years old, you can get that exemption. You might have a disabled vet is another option. But anyway, you want to make sure you've got all your exemptions that you're entitled to. Okay, so let's talk about the homestead exemption for a bit. If the house in which you live, if it's your primary residence, you should have the homestead exemption on it. Conversely, if it's a rental property, no exemptions can be put on it. So there are two benefits to the homestead exemption. First, some taxing entities will reduce your assessed value. By state law, all school districts must drop $40,000 off your appraised value before multiplying it by the tax rate. So let's say your property has a taxable value of $700,000. The school district will tax you based on $660,000. Now, other taxing bodies also give you a benefit if you have the homestead exemption. For example, Travis County gives you 20% of the taxable value as an exemption. So again, if it was a $700,000 property, 20% of that is $140,000. So you're going to be taxed on $560,000. So that is real dollars that you'll end up saving. Now, keep in mind, some taxing entities don't give you any benefit for having that homestead exemption. Now, the second benefit, and this is the one that's been most beneficial over the last few years, is the homestead. In the homestead is the 10% cap. Okay, so what that means is that if you had a homestead on your property in 2022, then the increase to 2023 can be no more than 10%. This is where we see that difference then between the market value and the net appraised, right? So the market appraisal is just what is your house worth. But the net appraised, that can only be 10% more than what your net appraised was last year. So now let me take it a step further where it gets a little more complex, right? So let's look at a homeowner who's had a homestead exemption, let's say from 2020 or before, right? Before all the values started going up. With this huge run up in home prices, your taxable value is now much lower than the appraised value, just like mine was. So this year, even if your appraised value increased slightly, or even if it declined, your taxable value probably increased the full 10% under the homestead exemption because you still haven't caught up to the appraised value. Remember back, in 2021, values were up like 40% across Travis County, right? So let's look at someone who purchased their home in 2021. This is the first year that they had the benefit of the 10% cap. They bought in 21, put a homestead on in 22, and that made the flip from 22 to 23 the first year they got that 10% cap. Well, unfortunately for them, the market didn't increase a whole lot. And so that 10% cap probably didn't impact them at all. And if you bought your home in 2022, make sure you've applied for your homestead exemption. A new law actually went into effect last year that if during any point during 22, you bought a house that didn't have a homestead on it, when you bought it, then you could apply to put a homestead on immediately. Now, This would typically apply to new construction homes, or if you purchased a house that simply, maybe it had been an investment property before, so it didn't have a homestead. So that could be put on last year, and you got the benefit of, the school district dropping off $40,000, but you didn't get that 10% benefit. That doesn't kick in until the flip from 23 to 24. All right. So now, if you bought a house last year that had a homestead exemption, which would be most of the resale homes, you had that homestead exemption from the prior owner all last year, and you had the benefit of it last year. This year, you've got to get your own. It will have fallen off, so you need to apply for your own homestead exemption. Now, the deadline is supposedly April 30th, but they accept these things retroactively. In fact, I have helped several people this year and into last year get these things retroactively applied. It's amazing to me, simply because I'm in this business. I know all of this stuff, and I make sure my clients do this stuff. We are like a hawk on our clients, making sure they get their homestead exemptions. But I've talked to some people who have had their house for years and never filed a homestead exemption. So all of a sudden, especially last year, they saw their taxes in many cases almost double. And so I've worked through with them how they can go and get the homestead exemption retroactively put on. Not all the way back to when they bought their home, but back a couple of years, which then kicked the 10% in, and they didn't have this massive spike last year. So if you're on here and you have lived in your house for a while and don't have a homestead exemption on it, you've got to get that done. Feel free to reach out to me separately, and we'll make sure that we can get it applied, at least going back a couple of years for you. That alone would save you thousands of dollars. It has for several people that we've helped out. And these, again, weren't my clients. They're just people who reached out to me and happy to do it. One of the other things I want to mention about the 10% cap and whatnot, the 10% cap does not apply to new improvements. So let's say that you put in a pool last year. Okay, let's say you had a house that was $500,000. You put in a pool that TCAD valued at $100,000. Then this year, your taxable value is going to be $650, right? You had the 500, and the 10% cap on that was 50. So that's 550. But the pool, the new $100,000 improvement you put on, that's not subject to the 10% because it was a new thing. So you'd be at 650 this year. Doesn't apply to a lot of people, but I know that trips people up. They wonder why it went up so much when they had that 10%. So getting back to other exemptions, I'm going to wrap up with the homestead again. You apply for it, online. You can fill it out by paper too. Most people do it online. The key, if you've moved into your home recently, you must get your new driver's license first, because you got to upload your driver's license and the address has to match. Any other questions, I'll address them during the Q&A or offline, of course, as well. Other exemption I want to mention, I talked about earlier, the 65 and older. What this does is this freezes the school tax portion of the dollar amount at which you qualify for the exemption. So let's say when you qualify for that exemption, you were paying $7,000 to the school district. Well, then you'll never pay more than $7,000 to the school district. Doesn't matter what happens to your property value. Doesn't matter what happens to the property tax rate. All of that's irrelevant. You'll never pay more than $7,000. Okay, that's the example. You'll never pay more than what you were taxed at on a nominal dollar basis when you got that exemption put on. And again, I think I also mentioned earlier, if you're a disabled veteran, check out how that works. You get different amounts based on your percentage disability, as stated by the VA. Okay, so that wraps up the exemption portion. So also want to look at that, as I mentioned, what's going on at the Texas Capitol this year. The property tax laws that have been in place didn't work super well with this rapid increase in property values. So the property taxes have increased quite a bit. And fortunately, we've got a strong budget surplus this year at the state level. So both the Texas House and the Texas Senate are looking at property tax relief. Now, I'm not going to get into a political discussion about this. That is definitely not the point. So I'm just going to kind of give you the facts as they stand. Let's look at the House first. They passed a bill. It was hugely bipartisan, right? It was 139 to 5. And they passed this like 2 weeks ago. And there are several key components in it. First, the 10% cap on the taxable, appraised value through the homestead exemption that we have talked about, that 10% cap drops down to 5%. Okay, so now moving, if this were to actually become law, next year, instead of taking, let's say, a property valued at 600, which could have gone to 660, if this were in place, it could only go to 630. Okay. In addition, that cap is no longer just for homestead properties. It would apply to every property, and not just residential. It's going to be all residential, but it's going to be commercial, multifamily, industrial, vacant land, whatever it is. The taxable value could only increase 5% each year. Second component of the House bill is what we call school property tax compression. And what that means is that the legislature essentially says, okay, we're going to give the schools more money, so the property tax rate has to be dropped by a certain percentage. Under the House bill, they would drop it 15 cents for every $100 in valuation. So the compression component also helps reduce payments that the districts have to make under recapture, also known as Robin Hood, right? And so, you've probably heard the number. Austin ISD pays about $800 million in the last year is what they paid from their taxes to the state to redistribute. So those are the two main components of the House bill. Now, in the Senate, they have taken a very different approach, right? So they passed a series of bills, a couple of bills, and they were all unanimous. So again, strong bipartisan support. In the Senate plan, the main item is that it increases the school district homestead exemption from $40,000 to $70,000. And further, the seniors and the disabled, they've got extra exemptions that would make their homes, if you're a homestead with the senior or disabled vet exemption, that jumps them from $50,000 to $100,000. Okay, so that part is there. And then there's the component of tax compression, and they would drop it 7 cents for every $100 in valuation. And once again, that whole tax compression thing helps with the recapture payments. So while I think it was implied as I talked about it, I want to be clear that the revenue that the school districts lose under these various measures are made up by the state using general funds, using that surplus that we have. So depending upon who you are, what type of property you own, whether you own investment property, et cetera, these different plans have pluses and minuses to you. So right now, the House and the Senate, they've each passed these bills. Like I said, broad bipartisan support in each of the houses. So they got to head to a conference committee to iron out their differences. And everything that I have read, this is going to be one heck of a brouhaha amongst these two factions, because neither of them thinks that the other one has any concept of doing what's right, that their idea is the best one. I have no idea what we're going to end up with this year. But whatever we do get, our tax bill most likely is going down. Now, if you've got the homestead in place and you're going up 10% in your taxable value, you're probably going to see, it's probably not going to go down, but it's not going to go up as much as it could have. But again, we just got to see what they come up with in the end. So it's very interesting to see what's going on down there. I'm sure that when they finally get something through, I'll post some sort of video talking about where we're at. But again, just wanted to go over with everybody what's kind of happening down at the Capitol building as we go through this. All right. So now more into the content of the actual protesting. Let's first talk about those people who bought a house in 2022. Again, it's your primary residence, get that homestead exemption on there if you haven't already. So protesting the year after you buy your home is usually the easiest one you're ever going to do. But the pattern of prices last year with the increase and then the decline really throws a wrench into it. Because in a regular year where the value doesn't change a whole lot, the appraisal districts often would just appraise your house at what you paid for it. Now, we're a non-disclosure state, which means that nowhere in the public record does it say what you paid for your house. If you look at the actual, warranty deed that is recorded, it says that the buyer paid $10 plus additional consideration. So the appraisal district doesn't know what you paid, and you should tell them. But let's say you paid $600 for your house and they appraise you at $650, right after you buy it. Well, then you do want to tell them. You want to protest, and you would send them in your closing statement so they can see what you paid. And in most years, without giant changes in prices, they would just lower it to what you paid for your house. But with the variations of pricing this year, we've got other factors coming into play. There is an easy side to it. Let's say you purchased your home towards the end of the year. Let's say October, November, December. What you paid for the house, that's probably a real good number for your tax appraisal. The prices were drifting down, but not by a lot. So if you bought your house in the fourth quarter and your appraisal came in higher than what you paid for the house, simply file a protest and submit your closing statement as the evidence. I already had a client do it. As I mentioned, we go through all of our clients. So I called her up and I said, hey, here's the situation. And she went online and she just submitted her closing statement. And within 2 days, they had lowered her appraised value to what she paid for the house. And she's all complete and good to go. Now, let's say you purchased your house from January to May. Well, it's pretty likely that your house is worth less today than when you purchased it. It's not fun. It's a hard pill to swallow. But on the positive side, if you purchased during that time, your mortgage rate is, probably still in the threes. So at least you can enjoy the low rate as that consolation prize. For those of you who purchased from June to September, your value was below the peak, but still has come down since you bought it. So both of those cases, essentially buying from the beginning of the year up through, say, September, we really just have to look at the appraised value, compare it to what you paid and what it was probably worth on January 1, and then you'll make that determination. So really, for those people who bought during that time frame, it's just like any other year where we just have to look at the numbers. All right, so what I am going to do, I said I was going to wait till the end for questions. The next portion, I'm going to walk you through how to actually do your protest. So since that's kind of like the other part, let me look at the questions that have come in, and I will answer them here. So I have a homestead and a senior exemption. My question related to the increase in assessed value from 22 to 23. The increase is limited to 10%. My 22 appraisal would be that. I'll have to look at it specifically. The market appraisal portion, that can go up to anything. We're looking at the net appraised value. That's the one that's important. And again, it also depends on when you got your homestead applied to it. Okay. So we'll probably have to do that one offline. How does a pool affect improvement value in Travis County? I think I probably answered that after you asked it. But Jessica, if I didn't, chime in again. And let's see, Travis County will get lots more property tax revenue over the next few years. Are there any discussions to decrease tax rate, or will it change? All right, I'd actually left this whole portion. I spent a lot of time last year's presentation talking about a law that went into effect in 2019. And what this law in 2019 did was it limited the amount of revenue that a taxing body could collect. School districts were limited to 2.5%. The specific question was on Travis County. Counties were limited to 3.5%. And the way this works, and we saw it play out last year, is that the county can only increase its revenue by 3.5% over the previous taxing year. And now we're only looking, that's on existing properties. If there was new properties built during the year, they're excluded from the calculation. We take what was the the taxable revenue last year, and then this year it can only increase by 3.5%. Well, last year, of course, values went up crazy, in 21, so the 22 numbers were up a lot. And what that meant was they had to reduce their tax rate because they could only increase their revenue by 3.5%. So we saw a lot of reductions in tax rates last year. Now, can an entity come out and say, well, we're still going to raise them by 5%? Yes, they can, but then that triggers an automatic election that the voters have to approve it. And LISD, Leander ISD is a good example of that. Leander ISD said, no, we're gonna raise it more than the 2.5% we're allotted. And I forget what the number was, and they had wrapped it up with raises for the teachers and stuff like that. And the voters voted and approved it. So there was a higher tax rate at Leander ISD last year that was approved by the voters. So yes, the revenue can increase, but only by 3.5%, which is why the tax rates last year came down. It does get very complex, but that's really how they work. So hopefully I've answered those. And again, on your specific property, you can either put an address in the Q&A and I'll look at it afterwards, or we can chat towards the end of this or offline or something like that. All right, so that's all the questions I see. So let's keep on moving through here with the protest itself. Now, there are two main reasons that you can protest. Market value is number one. And this is the information that I'm able to provide you with, right? We're going to compare the value of your house as the appraisal district has set forth, and we're going to compare it to recent sales of similar properties nearby. Usually we would say over the past year, but in this case, I'd probably just be looking at sale prices, say from, maybe July or August through maybe January or February of this year, right? So maybe about a 6-month window, around January 1, where we're going to look at those values. So, and we're only looking at houses that sold, right? And the county doesn't have that data. I've got that data through the MLS, and that's how we'll decide whether it's worthwhile for you to protest. And that's the data you would use when protesting. You would be able to show them this MLS data, right? Now, the other one is what we call, they may call it an assessment comparison. It's really what I often call the fairness method. And I don't help you with this, but it's something you can do on your own. And essentially, you're looking to see, setting market value aside, market value has nothing at all to do with this. Are you properly appraised compared to other similar homes nearby, right? So let's look at a situation where your house is worth $700,000. We just know that's what your house is worth, $700,000. And TCAD's got you appraised at $650,000. Well, from a market standpoint, you have no business protesting it because you're already below market value. But that doesn't matter in the fairness method. If when you start looking around at similar houses around you, they're all appraised at around $600,000, then you can protest and say you're treating me unfairly. Similar homes to mine are assessed at $600,000. You have me at $650,000, and then you should be able to get lowered down to $600,000. Now, again, I don't help you with this one, but what you do is you just go to the Travis County website. In fact, let me go ahead and share the screen again. So you're going to go to the TCAD website. This is their homepage. And you just go into property search, and then you got to go into property search again. Now it brings up a new page, and here you can search for a variety of things. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my own address. I'm going to go to Cassiopeia. That's what I live on. So here's all the houses on Cassiopeia. And what I would do is I would go into each one and I would look and I would say, okay, this one's assessed at that. And then I would go and I'd look and say, how big is the house? Okay, that one's similar in size to mine. And here's what they're being appraised at. And I'm just going to go down all the streets in my, I'm going to go down my street. Maybe I go a block over, but I'm going to look at all of that data and I'm going to decide, am I fairly appraised compared to other homes in the neighborhood? So that is, like I said, that's the second method that you can use. Doesn't matter what the market value is. Like I said, you can be underassessed, but if you're overassessed compared to your neighbors, the fairness method is your friend. All right. It's a little more research, but that can be done. So the actual protest, when you want to file it, TCAD has changed how this is done numerous times over just the past several years. I mean, for many years, if you filed a protest, you filled out a paper form, or you got when they first started online, you could just send the very basics in that way. And what would happen after that is you would have an informal hearing with an appraiser. You would go down to TCAD's offices, you'd wait in line, and you'd sit down across the table with an appraiser. And they would kind of lay out how they derive the number, and you would lay out why you think it's wrong, and you would have a discussion about it. And at the end of that discussion, they may say, well, I'm sorry, we don't see it. We're going to keep it as it is. Or they may offer you a price. And if you liked it, you could take it and you'd be all done. We don't do that anymore. In fact, for a while, when you filed a protest online, that was your informal protest, but you had no interaction with a TCAD employee. So for several years, I encouraged against people doing an online protest because then you couldn't talk to a person. So now they've swung back a bit, and we're back to having informal hearings. But you do not have in-person informal hearings. They're only over the phone or by video. So since it's the same regardless of whether you file your protest online or do it by paper, so it makes no difference, right? Most people are going to file online. It's the most convenient way. If you are going to file the paper protest, I think they probably are still sending it with your appraisal packet, your appraisal notice. But again, I haven't gotten mine yet, but I assume it's in there. If not, you can always just download it off the TCAD website, or whatever. I'm talking about TCAD, but whatever appraisal district you're in, if you're watching this on on YouTube later. So, but TCAD, the good news is they've got a new platform this year. It is so much better than the last one. The one that they had for the last few years was just terrible. So this one's better. So what you're going to do, again, let me go ahead and share the screen. I'll at least walk you through the first couple of screens here. So let me get back to, you go in here and you're going to go to protests and file your protest online. So what's going to happen? They're going to, you'll get another screen. Okay, e-file now. So you're going to log in, and I'm not going to log in because I have a property in there that's not mine. I'm going to show you that story in a minute. But you're going to create a username and password. You're going to log in, and this one, like I said, is so much better than their last system. It's user-friendly and easy to navigate through. But essentially, what you're going to do is you go in there and you're going to, it doesn't have your new account associated with any properties. So you go in, you search on your address. It's going to ask you for the PIN that is written on the paper form. It's not on the online. You can't see this PIN number online. It's on your paper form, and you enter the PIN, and then it will associate that property with your account, and you can file the protest. And again, like I said, it's really pretty self-explanatory. I have gone through this. I'm going to share a little story with you. So far, you probably haven't gathered my disdain that I have for TCAD. I don't hold back. I think that the TCAD leadership is awful. I think they're corrupt. I think they are anti-taxpayer, all the whole 9 yards. I have nothing nice to say about these people other than, well, they've selected a nice new online platform. I'll give them that. But beyond that, I don't care for anything they do. I have several videos on my YouTube channel. They're a couple of years old. I probably should freshen up with some new gripes I have about them. But anyway, they're out there. But let me just share with you the experience that I had. And this is not to thwart you from filing a protest, but I often represent the probate court in Travis and Williamson. I do both probate courts, that if there is a house that the court orders be sold, generally I'm the agent who's going to handle that. So I've got one in that we're handling right now. It's under contract. The place is a mess. A murder took place at the property. And we've got this thing under contract. I can't disclose the price, but we were asking $389,000 for it. And TCAD appraised this for like $580, right? So almost $200,000 difference. So I get the attorney to write the letter that says, Craig has the authority to protest. So we protest it right away. That's how I know their new system is nice and easy. And I got online. We haven't gotten to this part yet, but I got online and I got my on the phone hearing. And I explained to the guy, I upload the contract that we have right now and the sales price on it. I upload pictures. I tell him the whole story about the whole thing. And he's like, well, we can't accept that contract because, that contract is dated after January 1. I said, well, those photos I uploaded, they're from last April. This thing's hung around a long time. The probates always do. Anyway, they refused. They were like, no, we can't honor this contract. And so they knocked a little bit off the price. I flat out denied it. I'm taking this one all the way. And mind you, I don't even get the benefit of this, right? This is not my house. I'm not going to save any money, but this is just pure highway robbery by TCAD to want to assess the house at this insane value. So that's how I know their new system works. I've gone through the whole process. I said I've already protested one this year. I'm not going to be protesting my personal property simply because, because of the homestead exemption. I'm not even close to worrying about that yet. So anyway, thanks for letting me vent, tell you that story. But again, I'm not a TCAD fan. So you're going to go through there. You're going to file that protest. Doesn't take long, self-explanatory. But one of the things I want to bring to your attention, they're going to ask you, why are you protesting? And I forget, and I can't go back in to see it because I've already, finished up that protest. But you essentially have to tell them, under what guise are you protesting? We talked about the market being over market value, right? We talked about that. That's what the comps. And then the fairness, right? It's unequal compared to other properties. You don't have to choose just one. You should mark both of them when you're filing your initial protest. It doesn't mean when you actually sit down for your hearing that you have to argue both ways, but you can only argue what you've checked. So check them both right up front. Don't worry about it. Okay. And the other thing is they are going to ask you, what is your opinion of value? What do you think it's worth? And online, it's a required field. So you've got to kind of have to know a number. If you fill out the paper, it's not required. And so if you're doing that, I encourage you to leave it blank. I have known numerous instances over the years, myself included, where I have gone in and the amount that they offered me was less than really what I was expecting to get. So if I had told them a dollar amount, they probably would have lowered it to that instead of giving me the number that they gave me, which was lower than what I wanted in the first place. Not that that happens often, but I just kind of put that out there. But if you're going to protest online, it's a required field. Okay. Then you also have the ability to upload your evidence. And that might be documents like, for example, if you're going to do market value and I send you some comps because, yeah, you are overassessed. I think you're overassessed. You think you're overassessed. I'm going to give you the comps in an electronic format, and you're just going to upload them, right? Maybe we'll talk about this later, maybe you've gotten an appraisal, or again, if your sales, you bought your house in November, you're just going to upload your closing statement. These are all the sorts of things that you uploaded as evidence. I don't really talk about it much, but we don't see it in a whole lot in a lot of the homes, but let's say there's some significant deficiency with the house, like that probate one I was talking about. I uploaded pictures of the house, but if you have major problems at the house, and we're talking about like roof, foundation, things like that, you can upload a picture of a cracked slab, or you can upload an estimate from a foundation company, and they will take that into account. But minor stuff, don't worry yourself on minor stuff because they're not going to take it into account. So you upload all your evidence. And then, that's part of the protest. Now, you need to file your protest by May 15th. That date should be on your appraisal notice. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was not in the first large group of appraisals to go out. So like for me, my protest date is a little bit later, usually like May 30th, but that date will be on your form. So make sure you protest on time. So with all protests, again, if you purchased within the past year, use that closing statement. If you had a recent appraisal, let's say you did some sort of cash out refi. Now, probably not too many people have done that since rates started going up. But if for some reason you had an appraisal done within, I think it might be 6 months. We'll have to double check on that. You can provide that to them. Not a CMA, not someone like me thinking about it. We're talking about a real appraisal. So you can upload that as evidence. Foreclosures and short sales are not considered as comparable sales because we just don't have them in the market right now. So if let's say that there was a foreclosure, you can't use that as a basis for one of the comps you want to use in your argument. They're not going to consider it. Transactions have to be arm's length. Let's say that your next door neighbor sold to their child at a reduced price. That's not an arm's length transaction. That cannot be considered as one of your comps. You also want to make sure that all the data about your house is either correct or in your favor, right? How's the size, right? They never actually come out and measure your house while it's being built. And so sometimes we'll see, for example, let's take a 2-story home that's got a 2-story family room. Maybe when the TCAD put together the measurement for the house, they didn't realize that. And so they just took the first floor and the second floor and gave it the same size. So you want to make sure that you're close. Now, if you're, if you're a little bit off, they don't care if you've got a 3,000 square foot house and they've measured you 70 square feet bigger than what you think it is. That's not a big enough difference that they're going to worry about it. But if you have a 2,600 square foot house and they say you have a 3,000 square foot house, you want to bring that to their attention, and they will actually then come out and measure. Probably not during protest season, but they will eventually do that. So make sure that the data is correct, or at least in your favor. And when you're using the sales, like if I'm going to help you and provide you with some stats for some sales in the neighborhood, you can't just cherry pick the best ones. You kind of have to use an overall picture of it. So just be sure that when you go in, you can't expect them to just take the 3 lowest simply because that's more in your favor, right? You're going to look at more of a broad across the way spectrum. One other thing is I think it's a good idea if you protest a little bit later, especially if you're not sure you've got a great case, because what's going to happen is cases can go in where someone just bought their home like my client already had hers lowered. Well, that lower number works great helping someone else protest, for example. So there's no harm in being more towards the end of it. And you might find, especially if you're using the fairness method, that some of the other values get lowered between when they were first posted to when you do your protest. Also, the protest companies, this is a big industry. There are a lot of companies out there that will do this for you. They'll charge you a flat fee if they don't get anything, or take a percentage of what they save you. And they do their easy ones first, and then use the lowered values to help with the ones that are a little bit harder. All right, so that kind of covers all types of protests. So let's talk about that informal protest a little bit more. When you file your protest, you're going to have the ability to see what they call the evidence. And this is what the county has used to determine your value. So they're going to upload that and you'll have a chance to review it to see where they're coming from. So you're going to want to look at that. And again, ensure the data is correct on those houses as well. Compare it up to the information I have given you. So if you want to meet with an appraiser, let me go back to sharing the screen here. You're going to find that, let me see, go back to the protests. Sorry, informal meetings. You're going to find then that you can get in line now. And you simply follow that through. and they're put you in a queue, and then at the appropriate time, you're going to get a call. Or I just did mine on the phone. I didn't do mine through video. So I presume maybe the video, they're going to share with you some sort of link or something. But that's how that works. It's not a set time. You don't make an appointment and know that next Thursday at 2 o'clock, I've got this phone call. You got to use that get in line feature to do that. So let's see. I'm just trying to think of, let me check my notes here. One of the other things too is it used to be when you talk to them over the phone on these informal hearings, there was a little while where the appraiser couldn't even offer you a value. They had to get it approved by the TCAD upper level people. That was awful. They threw that out. And so now the person you're talking to, either on phone or video, can offer you a value. Now they may say they're not changing the value, or they can offer you a value. You do not need to decide immediately. What they're going to say is, here's the value. And then you're going to get a notice by email that they have put the value in the system. And I'm not sure how long you have to accept it or decline it, because again, on that one that I did, I declined it immediately. But so you don't have to do it while you're on the phone, but you probably don't have a lot of time to decide whether you're going to accept that value. But while you're in that informal hearing, again, the appraisers, you'll usually go first on an informal and present your case, and then the appraiser is going to go over what they used and see if you can come to some consensus. But it's just a back and forth dialogue is really what it is. So they're going to present you with a value, either the same one or something lowered. Now let's say you're happy with it, you accept it, the protest is done, you're good to go. But let's say you're not happy with it, like I wasn't. So what I did is I declined it. And now I'm going to go to the next stage, which is a formal hearing. And you'll often hear to it referred to as an ARB. This is the Appraisal Review Board. And these start in June. You can do it in person, or you can do it by phone or video. And you'll get notice about at least 15 days beforehand with your date and time. So the evidence is uploaded through the portal. So I don't know, since it's so easy, since the system has changed. In the past, you used to, if you were going in person, you had to bring like 5 copies of everything. I think now, since it's in the portal, they'll probably just see it electronically. I don't know the answer to that one yet, but you would know if you were going through this with the instructions they sent you. So essentially, the ARB is made up of citizens. These are not appraisers. They're not real estate licensees. They're just people who are, they're doing some civic duty, or they're just collecting a paycheck. They've received some minimal training. So what I'm telling you is these people are not specialists in knowing what properties are worth. So you sit down. I always do mine in person, and it's really just like a little mini courtroom. You're sitting on one side. Next to you is sitting the person from TCAD and their computers and their systems. And then in front of you are 3 people who are going to listen to both sides present their case. And then the 3 of them are going to chat with each other right in front of you. You'll hear what they say. They're going to chat with each other, and they're going to decide if you should be offered a lower value, and if so, what that lower value should be. And usually I have better luck with the ARB than I do with the appraisers at an informal. But I don't always have the best of luck. Frankly, the best of luck. I've got some properties, some condos up in McLennan County. That place is nice and easy. Those ARB boards seem to love the public and not so much TCAD, or not so much up there with the MCAD. Whereas here in Travis County, they kind of get the sense that, well, these people are the appraisers and they know what they're doing. I think that from my experience, the taxpayer has a higher hurdle, it seems to me, going in front of the ARB. But like I said, I have had success with them more so than others. Now, I get it. I'm in this business. I know what I'm doing. But you do, and you present your case, and they present theirs, and you see how it goes. Now, if you're not happy with the decision, for most of us, that's really the end of the line, because the next level in appealing it, you have to go to district court, which means you've got court costs, and it's a formal hearing in front of a judge. And for homes of our values, it really isn't worth it to go to that level. This is for people who own, hugely expensive buildings downtown or manufacturing facilities. That's the sort of thing that goes on to district court. You're welcome to do it, but I don't think you're going to find that the numbers make any sense to do so. Now, a few things that you want to avoid at both the informal and the formal hearings. Don't talk about price per square foot. They don't use that, and they're not going to put any stock in your argument. So please do not use price per square foot. Instead, what you're going to want to do is you're just going to make some adjustments. You're going to say, hey, this house is larger than mine, so we need to account for the difference in square footage, or this house has a better view than mine, or their lot is bigger, or they have a pool and I don't have a pool. Talk about adjustments in that manner. You're not going to give them a comparable market analysis, what's known as a CMA. They look at appraisals. They don't look at CMAs. Don't argue things like, oh, my neighbor, their house is a mess. They always got a car parked in the yard, and it's an eyesore looking over there. That's irrelevant. Doesn't come into play. Don't try anything like that. And don't use averages. I talked before, median is how we talk about pricing in real estate. Talk about terms, your values, talk in terms of median if you're going to be comparing to a group of other properties. Okay. If you do protest, let me know how to. Obviously, I want to help you with the data that I can help with. If you're going to do the fairness method, I'm not going to help you with that. But if you do protest, please let me know how it turns out, right? And then as well, obviously, I think you all know I'm a real estate agent. Have access to this stuff, but as well, if you're going to sell your house, buy your house, would love to be able to help you out with it. I have clocked this in at like an hour and 1 minute. Which is pretty good, but I have some more questions sitting here. So let me kind of run through the remainder of these questions. Bought my house and by the way, I've run through my prepared remarks. Leave if you've gotten what you need out of it. Stick around as long as you want. I'm going to stick around answering questions and whatnot. Reach me offline if you need to do that as well. Happy to do so. But let me just go ahead and answer questions. Bought my house in 2021. I have protested last year, and the value is set at the closing price. Awesome. I have a homestead on the house. They only reduced my property value by 2.25%. Yeah, that may be. But again, it's going to have to depend upon what the value of the house is. We've got to look at the comps, look at things like that. So again, you're going to have to reach out to me offline. We're going to have to look at your specific situation. Bernard gave me the specifics on his. Again, I think when you registered, I think you had to put in your email address. We can reach out offline. I'm not going to run through all these numbers while we're actually on the call. If you're using the protest using comps, is it purely the calendar year of 2022? No, they'll often look at stuff from January, February, sometimes even as far into March. So you can use some data there. I have heard of people running into situations at Travis and Williamson where I know they've accepted them before, where an appraiser, a specific appraiser, will only take them for the calendar year, but that's pretty, few and far between. Wouldn't it help us all if people with, wouldn't it help all of us if also people with lower after homestead value that you recommend not to protest as they don't save money, also protest to make us without homestead have lower numbers to compare fairness to? But if you don't have a homestead, well, it might, as an academic value, help people lower it. But truly, why would someone protest if there's nothing in it for them, right? It's kind of a hassle to do this. If I knew just from the numbers I could save $100 on my tax bill, that's not worth it for me. It's not worth the time and effort to go through this, right? So you got to take that into consideration. So if you don't have a homestead, that's unfortunate. But I don't think you're going to find other people doing it just to help you out. After all this with the statement I was looking at was for my neighbor. Didn't get my own yet. All right. So again, though, reach out to me. And let's talk about it. We'll pull up. We'll see if it's. I know, like I said, mine posted to the website just a couple days ago. So let's take a look and see what we can do. So that's all the questions that I have sitting there now. Again, if you have any other questions, time them in. Reach out to me offline. Again, in several of the situations we've already mentioned that's what we're going to have to do. But if you don't have any questions, feel free to jump off. But I'll stick around as long as we need to. I appreciate you all coming. Doing this again. If you chat with anyone, any of your neighbors, friends, or whatnot, we're going to do this again next week. And then again, it'll be posted, on YouTube. Tonight's was recorded. We'll record the other one, and whichever one I think turned out best, we will set up there for everybody to see. All right. Thanks again. I don't see any other questions coming through. See a couple of you have jumped off. A couple of you still on. What a nice group tonight. I guess you all can't see it, can you? I can see everybody who's on the call. You all can't. Nice group. I appreciate everyone being on. All right. Y'all have a good evening.